This is probably my most requested shoe for review of all of 2024. And did you know that if you're a professional runner, you actually can't race in it? Meet the Brooks Glycerin Max. What's up everyone, I'm Eric McIntyre, aka Rad Dad Bod, and you're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. Now today we're going to be talking about the Brooks Glycerin Max, which is a max cushion super trainer, daily trainer, potentially, from Brooks, and we'll talk about that. But if it's your first time here, you may notice some timestamps in the description below. Feel free to jump around to the different parts of the review that you want to check out, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate it if you came back when you got a second and watched the full video, as I put a lot of time and effort into these reviews to make sure they're as comprehensive as possible for each and every one of you. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. I'm happy to have you. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. And when you get a sec, leave a comment. Tell me what you liked about the review, what you wish I would do a little bit more of, or what I could be doing better, as I'm constantly looking to improve myself as a shoe reviewer. Now, kicking off this video, want to start with some disclaimers and disclosures, which for this shoe, there aren't really any. I did get a discount on the shoe from my local running store, Utah Run. That being said, I was not given it for free. I did pay for the shoe with my own money. Neither Utah Run nor Brooks nor anyone gets to watch this video beforehand. All thoughts are entirely my own. Now with that out of the way, let's talk about the intended use of the shoe. Now it's not explicitly clear by Brooks what this shoe is supposed to be used for, but we can kind of speculate. I mean, for the most part, we've got a supercritical tuned foam, you've got a max cushion underfoot. It's very similar to, think of like the Superblast or the SC Elite, which we would categorize kind of as those max cushion super trainers. So as such, that's how we're going to look at the shoe, as a shoe that is supposed to be kind of a training companion, a responsive shoe with a lot of stack underfoot. So with that in mind, let's break it down. Now the shoe comes in at a whopping $200, which for kind of that super trainer category is actually on the high end, but is not maybe as ridiculous as one may think. Other shoes kind of in this category, like the Superblast 2, which is another max cushion kind of non-plated super trainer, also comes in at that range, but many other brands are offering this level of shoe kind of in that 180 to 190 range for the most part. Now from a spec standpoint, this is where it starts to get a little bit crazy. So the shoe weighs 10.9 ounces, which for a max cushion shoe is not that heavy, but for a up-tempo responsive shoe is very heavy. On top of that, you have 47 millimeters in the heel and 41 in the forefoot for a 6 millimeter heel to toe drop. And for those who don't know, anything over a 40 in the heel, or I think actually technically any point in the midsole, anything over a 40 is deemed by illegal for professional use. So pro runners can train in the shoe, anyone can train in the shoe, but professional runners cannot race in this shoe. But if you're like me or any other runner out there who is not paid to run and is not a professional, then good news, if you want to race in this shoe, you can. Moving on to the fit, this shoe fits true to size lengthwise, but this shoe is high volume overall. And so it's going to be not just wide for a Brooks shoe, but potentially wide for even wide-footed runners. And all in all, just both in the heel, the midfoot, and the toe box, fairly wide overall. Something that I did have to kind of crowdsource for this one and ask a few of my fellow reviewers is how theirs fit. I actually wore an 11, which is not my normal size, but I got it from my local running store and they didn't have my normal 10.5. And in trying on the 11, at least lengthwise, it felt good. So if you do end up trying on the shoe and you feel like, hey, it feels a little bit short, you may be able to half size up. Upon trying on my normal 10.5 later, once I had already put some miles on this one, I felt like I could have gone with my normal size as well. But strangely enough, even though I do feel like the shoe fits wide, I didn't have really many issues with the shoe overall on the fit. So keep that in mind. Wide fitting overall shoe, maybe a tiny bit short, but for the most part, I would go with your standard size. Moving on to the upper, they have what's called a triple layered engineered air mesh. So this is a really kind of new upper style for Brooks. And the result is that the shoe is fairly breathable for the most part. Now for a max cushion shoe, you have kind of a mid-weight tongue as opposed to a kind of very thick tongue, and then you have some significant cushion here in the heel. And so there is a lot of that plush, but kind of there in the midfoot and the forefoot, as well as kind of that toe box, there is some breathable material for the most part. But even then, I did find that the shoe did get a little bit warm, but maybe not quite as warm as something like the Ghost Max 2 or more of your traditional max cushion shoes rather than your up-tempo max cushion shoes. Now, I've heard of some people having issues with heel lockdown. I did not have that problem. And again, I was technically a half size up on these. I didn't even have to use the runner's knot. I felt very locked into the shoe at all times. I didn't feel any shifting around, and I felt like the midfoot lockdown was really, really nice, despite there not being a gusseted tongue, which is kind of interesting because typically I need a fully gusseted tongue, especially in a wider shoe, to feel comfortable. So I don't know if there was just something about how I laced the shoes or how my foot in particular fit in the shoe, but I didn't have any of those heel issues or Achilles issues or anything that some people have talked about. Something kind of unique about the shoe is, you know, typically with a max cushion shoe, you feel like you're getting kind of overwhelmed from the top of the shoe. You just have so much extra plush in it. And that's not necessarily the case here, but you do feel like you're almost like wrapped around, even from the midsole. I feel like because you do sink into that heel, and I'll talk about that in a second, but you kind of just sink into the shoe as a whole. The result is like this shoe right out of the box, super, super comfortable. Like if you were just looking for the most comfortable shoe out of the box on foot, this might be it. But it is a lot. Like you feel every millimeter, you feel everything about the shoe when you put it on, for better or for worse. Now moving on to the midsole, Brooks basically invented a new midsole compound or new midsole setup for the Glycerin Max. And what we're dealing with here is what is called DNA tuned. So DNA tuned is a nitrogen infused supercritical foam that has different densities in the forefoot and the heel. So from my understanding, in the heel here, you're going to have larger cells, right? So these different foam cells are going to be slightly larger in the heel, and the result in that is they're going to compress a lot more, and it's going to be very squishy and very, very plush in that heel. And I definitely felt that you can really, really compress the heel there. Then in the forefoot, what they did was they have smaller cells, so they don't quite compress as much, and it's a little bit firmer, though very soft still, in the forefoot, and that results in a very kind of springy off the toe ride. So if you kind of think of how the shoe interacts with the ground, if you're a heel striker, it feels very, very comfortable. It compresses, and then as you roll through, it kind of launches you forward both with the glide roll geometry as well as the firmer foam in that forefoot. The resulting feel is some really, really good responsiveness and pace versatility in this shoe. I found that strides in particular were very, very effortless in this shoe. Like I would hit my normal effort on the stride and I'd look down at my watch and I felt like I was going faster. I mean, I could see that I was going faster than maybe a normal stride with the same amount of energy. So I was getting really, really good energy return. One thing I do want to talk about though is the 10.9 ounces. So like I said, 10.9 ounces is not heavy for a max cushion shoe. Like it's heavy for a shoe, but not necessarily for a max cushion shoe. But for a shoe that you want to take up tempo, for a shoe that you want to go long distances in, you know, at moderate to hard paces, that weight is going to add up. And that very much was the case with this shoe. I took it out this last weekend for a 12-mile long run. And with my long runs, I typically like to finish the last few miles faster, oftentimes getting up to threshold or slightly under my threshold effort. And in comparison, when looking, like I did the same thing with like the Superblast as well as the SC Trainer and the CLOX1 in the past, like those, though were heavy, like I just felt like they had a little bit more pop still at that point of the run. Where with the Glycerin Max, yes, I was hitting the paces, but I felt like I had to really earn and fight for every second of those paces towards the end of the runs. So yes, it's a great shoe, very comfortable. Like if I was going easy for 12 miles or easy for 2 hours or whatever it may be, really, really good option. And you're going to be faster in this shoe than you probably would be in a standard max cushion daily trainer. But it's not a shoe like if you're thinking, oh, I want a marathon training shoe that I could take out for 14 miles at marathon pace and feel really smooth and light on foot. I wouldn't necessarily recommend this shoe for you. I might actually go for something like maybe a P-Bax or plastic plated or a nylon plated, super trainer as opposed to a max cushion super trainer. So again, pace versatility, it's definitely there, but I wouldn't really want to be using this for faster efforts for longer intervals or longer periods of time necessarily. Now, the other thing is, despite being 47 whopping millimeters in the heel, the shoe is very stable overall. And that probably has just contributed to like the wide overall base of the shoe. And so the midsole, it compresses nice. It's very smooth heel to toe. There's a lot of really, really good things going on with this shoe, and may be a good option even for those with stability needs. Now, I tried to figure out what the rubber was on the bottom of the shoe. Just feeling it, it doesn't feel the same as the blown rubber on the Ghost Max 2. And so I do think it is a slightly different compound, though similar overall. And the outsole does its job. Again, I don't think there's anything special to write home about with the shoe. I have run on like some wet surfaces just from rain, but not necessarily in the rain. They seem to do a good job. I didn't really slip around. And so for the most part, outsole gets it done. The outsole is fairly thick as well. So my guess is this DNA tuned foam is not going to be the most durable. I don't know that for sure, but that's just if I had to hypothesize based on it being a supercritical foam. So that thicker outsole is welcome, and it will add some additional life to the shoe as a whole. I do feel like the shoe is fairly well balanced. When you're in this max cushion super trainer category, oftentimes the shoes are bottom heavy. And I feel like this shoe, for the most part, has a pretty good balance. And so you're not gonna feel like you're just strapped onto the foam necessarily. As far as who's this shoe for, that's where this kind of category gets a little bit confusing to me, because what I have found personally is if I want to put effort into my long run and not just be like running it easy, then I want something that's a little bit lighter on foot or something that's a little bit snappier for those longer distances. On the other end, if I'm going to be doing like a long run, just like an easy long run, then sure, like something like this feels really, really nice. Or if I just want a little bit more energy return on my daily runs, then yes, like this feels really, really nice. You get kind of, you can wear these for recovery runs, you can wear them for easy runs. They're gonna feel super plush. You'll be a little bit faster than normal. But with the price tag of $200, it feels like an excessive premium for that type of usage, if I'm being honest. So as far as like who's going to really use this shoe, running shoe enthusiasts are like probably honestly like the #1 category I'd choose. I think this actually could be a good racing option for those who have been training and doing like all of their miles in something like the Ghost Max or maybe the Hoka Clift and Hoka Bondi, but they want something with a little bit more bounce but don't want to go the carbon plated route. This could be a really good racing option for you, right? And in that sense, if you're paying $200 for a racing shoe, that's great. That's great value there, right? But as far as like super trainer, long miles, I just don't know if the shoe fits that usage, and I definitely don't feel like the price tag is quite there. I feel like this shoe probably should have been $20 to $30 cheaper than it was marketed as, but it's the first usage of DNA tuned by Brooks. It's completely innovative from Brooks, and so I understand why they did price it at a premium and put a lot of hype and marketing behind the shoe. Now, from a comparison standpoint, this shoe reminded me most of one of the first Max Cushion super trainers on the market, which was the New Balance SC Trainer, specifically the first iteration. Now, the differences here are that the dual densities of the foams in the SC Trainer are kind of a top layer foam, bottom layer foam, and then you do have a carbon fiber plate. Actually, I can't remember if it's carbon fiber or if it is a plastic plate, but you do have a plate in this shoe. So these shoes felt very similar to me because they felt really good. They felt really comfortable. They felt like they could go the distance. They felt like they had really good energy return, but they were heavy. And so like every other run that I took these shoes out for that was longer and with a little bit more pace, I remember I would always kind of just come running in and like really having to like make sure I was putting tons of energy in the ground to kind of hit the paces that I wanted at miles 13, 14, runs along those distances. So very, very similar overall. The Glycerin Max is softer, but the SC Trainer has a little bit more pop because of that plate. It gives it a little bit more structure. So similar overall usage and feeling though for me. But again, I think this shoe was cheaper, and I did get this one on sale actually, but I do feel like this was cheaper at the time as well. And I know the new SC Trainer V3 is like $180, so about $20 less than the Glycerin Max. Now, if you tried the Skyward X and you want to compare it to the Glycerin Max, I found that the Skyward X was to me, it felt like a stability max cushion trainer with a little bit of pace. And this foam was very, very stiff versus this foam was very, very soft. And this foam loosened up over time. But the reason why I find that these shoes are very similar, besides the overall stack and kind of category there, is that the Skyward X, you also really had to put a lot of effort into the ground. The difference is that strides, so kind of those short accelerations, I felt like I had to almost sprint in the Skyward X, versus with the Glycerin Max, it felt smooth. But those sustained kind of paces, those sustained, slightly longer, moderate to hard efforts feel similar in these shoes, in the sense that you do have to put a lot of energy into the ground. The weight does weigh you down. Now, the Glycerin Max is so much more accommodating. The arch of the Skyward X was very pronounced, and the shoe felt very, very narrow through the midfoot, which was kind of an awkward feel. And so if you wanted to like the Skyward X, or you liked the Skyward X, but the fit was just off for you, maybe consider the Glycerin Max. Now, another shoe of probably equal hype, the Asics Superblast 2. In my opinion, this is kind of the gold standard of this max cushion super trainer category, right? The Superblast 2, a little bit lighter. The foam is firmer, but that gives you a ton of energy return. And so running in these two shoes for 12-mile runs on back-to-back weeks, just as a comparison, like I felt light and nimble and fast in the Superblast 2 while still feeling that protection underfoot, though it was a little bit unstable, versus the Glycerin Max, way more comfortable, way more plush, very, very stable, very wide base, but having to fight for every step, every pace. So for me, like my preference, I'm not saying this is right or wrong, for my preference, I like something a little bit lighter, a little bit more pop on those long training runs. That's where the Superblast 2 is, for me, a little bit more, and you get a lot more pace versatility, like true pace versatility out of this shoe. So if I'm going to pay $200, for me, I would rather go the route of the Superblast 2. That doesn't make the Glycerin Max a bad shoe. I just think it might be a little overpriced in that sense. Last comparison here, the Mizuno Neo Vista. I think that Mizuno was so close with this shoe, and I actually think for a lot of people this was a huge winner. For me, the fit was just off, and I feel like had they gone with the Glycerin Max approach of a slightly wider fit, a little bit more volume in the upper especially, or even like slap this upper on this shoe and then widen the base a little bit, then Mizuno would have absolutely crushed it with the shoe. And again, a lot of people felt like they crushed it with the shoe. This was a very popular, or is a very, very popular shoe. This is so much lighter. It's not even funny. This is a very light shoe in comparison to the Glycerin Max. And as such, the underfoot feel to me is kind of similar. And so I feel like more brands, if they're going to go with this max cushion super trainer category, need to go the route of the Neo Vista, need to go the route of the Superblast. At least that's my opinion, because otherwise the cost of these shoes feels just too high for the usage, because the weight of the shoes is making them more of standard max cushion daily trainers as opposed to more up-tempo marathon and faster pace style shoes. So Mizuno Neo Vista, a lot lighter, crazy narrow shoe though, so keep that in mind. If the Glycerin Max is wide and you're looking for something very, very narrow, but with some nice cushion underfoot, something with a little bit of pop, but that protection, then the Neo Vista might be the move for you. Final thoughts on the Glycerin Max. I really like the shoe. I like it a ton. I've enjoyed every single mile in it, but $200 for a shoe that for me is too heavy to realistically do longer training runs in, and is gonna kind of get relegated to more of an easy recovery day type shoe where I'm only really going 5-6 miles. To me, that feels expensive and feels excessive for that usage. Now, what excites me though is that Brooks tried something new with the foam, and I do think that the foam is a winner. So I'm going to be very curious to see how this gets integrated into future models. I have heard that maybe the Glycerin 23 is going to actually have DNA tuned in the shoe. So I think that's massive. I think that will upgrade that shoe a ton. And so I'll be curious again where else this pops up, because I do think that they are onto something with the foam, and I love to see Brooks innovating. This is like the third or fourth shoe from Brooks this year that I felt really, really good about, that I felt like the direction of the company was headed in the right direction after, decades of kind of being just your standard like daily trainer type company that makes really, really high quality products, but nothing really exciting at the end of the day. So I've already seen a preview of some of the stuff to come in 2025. I'm super excited for what Brooks is doing, and I think the Glycerin Max is a huge step in the right direction. And if you've got some extra cash to burn nowadays, and you're thinking that you want something that's going to be very, very comfortable, very, very plush with a little bit of responsiveness, even for your easy days, then the Glycerin Max might be for you. So there you go. If you've watched this far, I sure appreciate it. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button and leave me a comment. Let me know if there's anything that I can be doing better to improve these reviews for each and every one of you. And as always, I'll leave you with a question, which is, what do you think Brooks should have priced the Glycerin Max at? Is $200 appropriate, or should they have gone lower? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.